Hi there, Rob speaking. I wanted to talk to you today about SWOT analysis. Now, everyone's heard of SWOT analysis, and probably today, I imagine a lot of you out there use a SWOT analysis. To what point we're effective and efficient when we're using this tool is another question entirely. You all know how to draw a SWOT matrix, and basically you put your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and your threats in the 4 different quadrants of the matrix, of the SWOT matrix. And then basically you try and fill in each part of the matrix with the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats that exist for your company. Well, that's great till there, yeah? But what we don't often consider is that there are other considerations that have to be taken into account if we're to do a SWOT analysis properly. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, let's think about the first part. Basically, everything that's internal. So we're talking here, internal to the organization that is, or the company. So we're talking here about strengths and weaknesses of the company. Now, to determine what the strengths and weaknesses of a company are, we're going to have to, at one point, ask ourselves another question before we start. In fact, 2 questions, one at a time though. So one of the very first questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves are, we have to determine what are our key success factors. What are we looking to achieve with this SWOT analysis? What do we have to look at to ensure that we're putting ourselves in a position for success? Well, normally, key success factors can be different for different companies. It depends really what type of company you have. Is it a manufacturing company? Is it a retail company? Are you actually a mining company, so raw materials? Or are you a service company? So whichever one of those areas you're actually operating in, you will always have key success factors. Some will be the same and some will be different. But in order, before you even start to do a SWOT analysis, and here we're only talking about, and I'm reminding you again, the strengths and weaknesses, we have to really think and talk about the key success factors. Now, what are these factors? Well, for one, pricing. Now that affects most companies and most organizations worldwide. If you get the pricing wrong, then your market, unfortunately, is going to probably disappear. So if you're in an environment where price-based competition is extremely important, you have to be watching prices all the time to ensure that your price is the correct price. That's the right price at the right time for the right person in the right place. So there we've just mentioned the 4 P's of marketing. Although that's not price, product, place and promotion is not really part of this video today. It is, however, important to understand when you're talking about pricing, all of those things have to be taken into account. Which market you're looking at, how much are people willing to pay for your product, and where comes the time, where comes the price point where people stop wanting to pay that price for the goods that you are offering, the goods or services that you are offering. So pricing would be a key success factor for most organizations. So you really have to study your pricing and get your pricing right, and ensure, of course, that your pricing allows you to make a profit, and that also allows you to ensure cash flow. As we all know, cash is king. So make sure you make sales fast, and you recuperate your money fast. Okay, so that's key success factors related to pricing and money. Another one that can be very important for everyone is adaptability. Now, adaptability means adaptability to conditions that change. So basically, this can be to do, for example, with your customers. Your customers might require something new. For example, more and more customers, let's talk about cars. You know, more and more customers want electric cars today, or cars that run on GPL or gas, or probably in the future we'll be looking at towards cars that run on hydrogen, for example. So, and of course, the fuel-driven cars, driven by diesel or petrol, will probably, very probably, in the next 20 years, no longer be available, or in actual fact be wanted by anyone. So of course, now you've seen the car companies, they're going to have to adapt. They have to build electric models, they have to build hybrid models, they have to adapt to what the market wants. But it's even more important than that, isn't it, really? And imagine if you don't adapt, what's going to happen? Well, if you don't adapt, as we all know, in evolutionary terms, if you don't adapt, then you tend to die off. And it's the same things for a company or an organization. If you don't adapt to the market and what's going on in your market, you're not going to last. You're not going to become sustainable. And you're certainly not going to have a competitive advantage. Now, to explain what I'm saying in terms of adaptability, let's get into another subject very briefly. Another example. If you remember Kodak and what happened to Kodak, Kodak were very slow when they saw the digitalization of cameras coming. They thought, oh no, we'll just continue what we're doing, and we're quite satisfied with that we've still got a place in the market and we don't have to digitalize and so forth. And then all these other companies, you know, Sony and Samsung and everyone else, they all made these digital cameras. And of course, what happened is that the normal reflex camera took a dive, in terms of market share. And because they hadn't seen this coming, or didn't see it early enough, Kodak set themselves up for failure, basically, at that point. Now, this has happened a lot, obviously, adaptability and adapting to innovation, adapting how fast you have to adapt. Just look at phones, how fast they adapt. We just talked about cameras. Do we need cameras anymore? Do we need digital cameras anymore? Maybe not. There's some of the cameras that are on the market today take such high quality photographs, we don't even need these digital cameras anymore. So that's going to be another adaptation that's going to take place. And anyway, you can go as far back as you like with this and say, for example, when I was young, a long time ago, you were talking about listening to the radio and watching black and white televisions. There were only 6 channels, and this is when I was quite young. And then as I got older, we got colour TV, and eventually you go, oh yes, now we've got 21 channels. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. And then of course, then we thought, okay, and then VHS videos happened. We thought, oh yeah, that's fantastic. Now we can watch things when we want to watch them, with our VHS video or Betamax recorder. Fantastic, yeah. Well, that didn't last very long, did it? Because then arrived CDs, and CD-ROMs, and compact disc and DVDs. So basically you could watch on your little disc, and you put it in a machine, and you could watch your film. So videos they died off, and DVDs took over. And woe betide, of course, now we know that streaming is the way forward, and everyone that's named Netflix or Disney Channel, whoever they are, they're taking the main share of the market now. So you can see that what I just said there was over probably quite a long period, 20 years. But it does show how things change and how things become, at the end of the day, not sustainable, unsustainable, basically. So adaptability, obviously, is something that's very important. So key success factors so far that we've seen: pricing and adaptability, which obviously most companies are going to have to look at, to ensure that their pricing is correct and that they can adapt to changes in the market and what's happening and what customers want. And then differentiation. How do you differentiate products from one another? Well, it's a lot of things can happen. I mean, it's not just to do with the product itself anymore, is it? Because if for example, let's say you make a best price promise on a product, and then it's not kept. It's basically someone else is selling it better than you, and you don't reimburse the people that have asked for this best price promise to be respected. Well, if you don't respect your own promise in terms of differentiation, that's not going to work, not for long in any case. Another type of differentiation is just to say that, for example, in a car, if you got the choice between a car that's you're going to have to add in a GPS, a mobile GPS, or it's got GPS integrated into the car and so forth. Yeah, well, that would be differentiation. And I prefer to have the car where it's already integrated into it. I don't have to buy one and think about that. So that's another type of differentiation by the physical product itself. But then it's more than that, isn't it? Because you can differentiate the products through after-sales service, manufactured products or retail products. It can be the level of service, for example, in a supermarket. Can we make a difference like that? We certainly can. And if we get a reputation for that, then in fact it helps the brand, doesn't it? Or differentiation, if we look at the service sector, then it can really be seen. Because in terms of, you might also have, a hotel, for example, or a restaurant, which has got a fantastic reputation for the food and so forth. But in fact, how are they differentiating? Well, they might be differentiating because they've got a chef that's extraordinary, and this food can be eaten nowhere else in the entire world. So that's differentiation. But it could also be just because of the service in this restaurant or hotel that's so exceptional that people come back just to see the people that are actually working there. This can happen as well. So, we only need to take a very brief look at TripAdvisor to know that's true. Because most of the comments on TripAdvisor aren't about the products, the hotel products, or wherever the person stayed, or the restaurant. They're mainly about the people that work there, and whether the service was good or not. They're mostly service related. So differentiation can be a lot of different things. Excuse the pun. Innovation, is innovation important? Well, we talked about it. We touched on the subject earlier. Innovation and design, innovation and design go together, don't they? So, if you've not got the latest iPhone or the latest Oppo phone or whichever type of phone you prefer, and it's got all these new features, then you can be slow off the mark and lose the market share because you didn't innovate fast enough, This has happened, as we mentioned earlier, happened a lot, And then there's just the marketing and distribution of your product. Are you marketing and distributing your product? Is that a key success factor for your product? Let's think about, you've got a product and you know that your product is, let's say in North America, it's a very popular product. And you discover, your website, that you discover your competitors are all beating you. And you're asking yourself, well, why are my competitors beating me here? Well, if it's a key success factor, it's the marketing, and then you look at your website, say, yes, we are indeed marketing our product to North America, and our website's only in English. Well, shouldn't it be in Spanish too? It is the second language in North America. So you of course you're losing market share because it's not even in Spanish. So marketing, with the 4 P's that we mentioned earlier on, so product, place, price, promotion, are obviously very important in this aspect of things too. So key success factors. I think you've understood that key success factors, you have to look at it, what it is exactly that makes you successful. Is it because your product is so differentiated? Is it because you have a price advantage on your product that no one else can beat your prices? Because you've got a hold on the raw materials market. Is it because you're adaptable? You can adapt to change in the market. You innovate much faster than everyone else, and you can put things into action and produce much faster. You have to discover what these key success factors are for your company and organization. And then, when you look at your SWOT analysis, of course, one of the very first things you're going to look at is all of the key success factors, and whether these are strong points or weak points in your organization, So that's one of the very first points. Then we can go on to something else. And we're still here talking about strengths and weaknesses. So strengths and weaknesses, once again, okay, they're internal to the organization. We'll look at opportunities and threats later on, which are external. But when you're looking at strengths and weaknesses, we've already looked at key success factors, but then we also have to look inside the organization. When I say look inside the organization, what am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about the resources of the organization, obviously. So, what kinds of resources do organizations have, and which have to be looked at in the context of carrying out a proper SWOT analysis? Well, you've obviously got internal resources which are called human resources. You've also got material resources. You've also got financial resources. And last but not least, immaterial resources. So let's go through these things one at a time. Let's talk about human resources. Well, human resources is a vast subject. So, we're talking more and more today about the employer reputation. We just have to look towards our friends in the across the big gap. I should say the Atlantic Ocean, and we can see that in North America we have the Great Resignation going on, and we have problems in Europe too, of course, not to deny that. But there is a big problem with human resources. There's a huge problem with the recruitment. There's a huge people problem, because people are not anymore willing to accept bad conditions at work or toxic behavior in the workplace, and they certainly want to be paid at the right price for what they're really worth. Yeah? So human resources is extremely important, and it's becoming more and more important to know how to manage and how to lead people correctly. So I would say that, for example, in your human resources, you're going to look at a few things. You're going to look at, for example, how is your evaluation process? How are performance reviews carried out within the organization? Are they carried out by people who actually know how to carry out a performance evaluation? Have your managers been trained to do performance evaluations? If they've not, that's obviously going to be a weak point. If they have and they're great at it, that's a strong point, obviously. Yeah? How's the training in our organization? How do we decide which training is most important? Do we take this information from our performance reviews? Do we concentrate on what people really need to be trained in, and not just what they want to be trained in? That's an important question to ask as well. Yeah, do we have the necessary resources in-house to train our people, or are we going to have to go outside to ensure that the training's carried out in a very professional manner? Now, these are all questions that we have to ask ourselves about human resources, and we also have to understand the recruitment and selection processes. Yeah, onboarding is another huge one. Yeah, especially in light of what I said earlier about the Great Resignation. So if you don't onboard or initiate people within the organization in the correct way, the very first thing that's going to happen is you're going to waste all this money on people who haven't been properly onboarded, and they're going to leave very quickly, which is going to be very costly in terms of selection and recruitment, isn't it? So that's to do with talent management as well. How do we manage the talent in our organization? Are we good at managing talent? Do we give the proper awards at the correct times to people? Do we recognize people's performance within our organization? How are we getting on in our organization? We really have to ask ourselves those difficult questions, and we have to be able to answer them, particularly when we're doing a SWOT analysis. So then we can go on to material resources. Now, what are material resources? Well, material resources just to make sure that people have the tools to actually do their job. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? You might think, well, yeah, that's obvious. I mean, people get the tools, yeah, but it's not always that obvious, is it? If people, for example, let's take managers. What's the tool that a manager needs to be successful? Well, a lot of managers start out as experts, don't they? So if you're an expert in finance or an expert in marketing or an expert in HR, whichever field you're an expert in, but are you an expert manager? Well, that's a very, very important question to pose yourself, because if in the organization that you're in, people are promoted because of their expertise, there's nothing wrong with that, please understand me, and are put suddenly in charge of a team, but before they've been working on their own, and they have no training in terms of leadership training, so no one gives them any kind of management training, no one trains them on how to, for example, carry out an evaluation, a performance evaluation. No one gives them any training about situational management. What does it mean? How do we deal with different contexts within a management situation? How do we manage teams? How do we manage meetings? All these things that we didn't have to manage before, because they don't necessarily have this expertise. I mean, far too often, HR thinks that naturally they have all this competence, but they don't have this competence. This is competence that has to be taught, has to be learned. So These material resources, of course, this is just managers. Now, on a more basic level, well, not a more basic level, but also very important, is that if you don't give the correct tools to people in terms of, let's say, you're in an office situation and the computers are all 10 years old and they're breaking down all the time. The IT guy doesn't. You've not even got an IT guy, so everyone's struggling to fix their computer most of the time instead of actually doing their job because they don't have the right tools to do their job. It's like asking people, yeah, okay, you're at a building site and why don't you put that concrete in these foundations? Fantastic, let's do that. Can I have a spade? Oh, we don't have any spades. So you do that with your hands? No, you're not. Yeah. So I know this are very extreme examples, but this happens all the time. I've had examples where people say, yeah, just go and clean all this up. Yeah, well, I don't actually have a vacuum cleaner. Could someone buy me one? Oh, we didn't realize that. So let's maybe buy you a vacuum cleaner. But these things happen all the time. So the material resources are extremely important to ensure that people have the correct tools to do the job, which hopefully they've been trained to do. Financial resources. Well, no company or organization is going to get very far without financial resources. Now, whether those financial resources come from personal equity or become from your own pocket, in other words, or whether that comes through for example, an investment fund or an angel investor or a bank or whoever else is going to invest in your business, you're going to have financial resources in order to do anything in a business. Yeah, so you're there to make money, you're there to make profit. So the financial resources that you have at your disposition, will determine what you can and cannot do. And that's why we talk about things such as budgeting and so forth. Do we have basically a credit line with the bank that's open all the time, so that if we need to, we can get more money on loan very quickly and inject cash into the business? Is that possible for us, or is it not possible? Another strong or weak point once again, whether it's possible or not. So I think that financial resources should be quite obvious. But in any case, very, very necessary to look at when you're doing your strengths and weaknesses, It's a resource which you really do need to think about a lot. And you also need to think about the differences between, for example, profit and cash. Because, how many businesses have I seen who made lots of profit? That's fantastic. Well, let's make profit. That's great. But when it comes to cash, oh dear, there's no cash in the bank. How are we going to pay the people that we owe money to? How are we going to pay these customers that we have to reimburse? How are we going to pay our suppliers? We can't. Well, there's a difference between profit and cash, and as we always say, cash is king. So very careful with that. Make sure you have cash. The cash flow is important. It's not something that you can just put to one side. You can make profits and still go bankrupt if you're not getting paid and not able to pay your suppliers. So then we can look at material resources. Well, immaterial resources, you say, well, it's immaterial. Excuse the pun. Well, it's not, is it? Not today, because a brand, the reputation of a brand, you even have to think about things like e-reputation. Is our e-reputation fantastic? So there's so many sources of consumers telling you on internet, for whatever kind of business you have, whether it's a service business, whether you've got a scuba diving club, whether you've got you're going to watch dolphins on a boat, and that's your business. Whatever it is, you're going to have you on TripAdvisor at some point, and people are going to give their opinions of what they think about your business. So your e-reputation is going to be an extremely important part of your whole branding process. So you're going to have to be very, very careful with that, and you have to be able to ensure you do as best as possible. So your brand strength, and it's going to be a lot to do with that. Your reputation. Also your reputation as an employer, as we mentioned earlier when we talked about human resources, but that's all equally important that your customers have a good image of your company too, so your e-reputation. There's also other things like patents and so forth, which are immaterial. You can't see them, you can't touch them. Logos, copyright issues and so forth, which have to be looked after for a company too, You don't want someone else calling themselves McDonald's, Do you? No, I'm sure McDonald's wouldn't be okay with that. So I think we've got the main idea. So once again, just to go over what we've learned so far, you know, in a SWOT analysis, when we're talking about strengths and weaknesses, we have to look at the key success factors, yeah, and to name some of the key success factors is things like pricing, adaptability, differentiation, innovation, design, marketing, all that kind of thing, yeah. Then, on the other side, when we look at internal resources, we're looking at things like human resources, we're looking at material resources, we're looking at financial resources, we're looking at immaterial resources, as we just mentioned, such as branding, copywriting, brand image, you know, so your image on the internet and so forth, yeah. So all these things are very important. So, and we haven't even mentioned opportunities and threats yet, have we? See, because opportunities and threats, the big difference here is that opportunities and threats are not internal to the business. These are things from outside of the business which can affect business. Now that's the biggest mistake people make when they're doing a SWOT, is they're talking about opportunities and threats when they're talking in the strengths and weaknesses section. No, opportunities and threats are external. They're things that come from outside. They're things that you don't necessarily have control over, but which you have to be aware of. It's as simple as that. So, and one of the best tools to look at this, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this tool and know this tool and actually use this tool, is the PESTEL. And when I'm doing a SWOT analysis, I always use the PESTEL because this allows you not to forget certain areas that you must be looking at when you're looking at your opportunities and your threats. So, opportunities and threats. Political. Well, political strife, you know, if there's strikes, you know, basically, let's say you've got a service-oriented business and there's constant strikes in the city where you are, and no one's coming into your restaurant or your service outlet or your retail outlet or whatever it is because they can't get there because of the strikes. Well, if it's transport strikes, for example, that can have a serious effect. And then politically, maybe the government are going to have to get involved with the transport companies and ask them, please, can we work something out here so that the economy can get back en route. But as a businessman or a business organization, of course, this can have a great effect, you know. And it's not the only political thing, is it, really? I mean, there's so many aspects to things that are political. We'll talk about geopolitical, for example. You know, if there's a war and basically these things are in short supply. And I think at this exact moment as I'm speaking, you know, in September in 2022, yeah, there's obviously problems in Europe with the fuel provisions and so forth. Inflation's going rampant due to this geopolitical situation as well. And of course, with fuel prices and energy prices going up, this is going to become extremely difficult for the business. And this is something that you've not got any control over. This is something coming from outside impacting your business. Now, it's how you're going to react to that that's going to be important for the success of the business. Economic, we've touched on that as well while we were talking about the political. But let's take an economic downturn in 2008, yeah, with the subprime crisis. And in 2008, as we know, Lehman Brothers, first of all, you know, basically crashed due to having given too many loans, basically, which were what we call toxic loans across the board to lots of banks and so forth. And then the banks themselves, you know, putting up interest rates to try and cover themselves. And of course, doing that, lots of people lost their homes. So a very tragic event indeed, economically. And then economically, when people no longer have money to pay for the basics, such as housing or food, they're not going to be buying any luxury goods that you might want to offer from your company or luxury services. That is for sure. Yeah, so the economic downturn hit a lot of people very badly. It hit the tourism industry very badly. For example, a big downturn in 2009. Social. So, you know, there's a social, for example, basically when you have aging populations and so forth, this has impacts on basically whether or not you're going to cater to people that are older and so forth. So basically your products and so forth, people are more fragile when they're older. They perhaps need more security for a number of different products and services. So basically, demographics can become extremely important, extremely fast for a business. And social can also be things like you know, how people adopt basically or don't adopt new technology. That can be a social and cultural issue too. Yeah. if you want a proof of that, you just have to look at the Japanese populations who are still booking through travel agents when the whole of Europe are basically still now booking through, booking.com or .com, or the Americans through Expedia. But the Japanese are still going through traditional travel agents, so it can be cultural too, yeah, not as social and cultural. Technological and innovations. Well, the technology and innovation moves. This is the T of the pastel now we're on. It's just so fast, isn't it? Really, I mean, we talked about it, we touched on it earlier on. But when technology changes and basically, sometimes you think, well, we don't have to change straight away because that technology is not going to be adopted by people for a long time. And then you discover, no, it actually has already been adopted, and people are going to be using that now. And long gone are the days when you needed a key to go into your hotel room. Now it's all electronic cards. In the future, there'll be a thumbprint, as on your phones. Your phone has now facial recognition. When did it? When I was imagining when I was young, and I was still dialing the phone, and it had a lock on it, so we couldn't use it at home. But now, today, yeah, your phone recognizes you. My goodness, I mean, this is 30 years ago, who would ever have thought that? That's no one, to be honest, I think. So technology moves very fast, and you have to be, if you go back to the key success factors, you have to be able to adapt to these technological changes which happen. Environmental, well, the environmental changes, I don't think there's any, unless you're an environmental skeptic, there's no doubt that we're all going to have to adapt at some point to these enormous changes that are happening in the environment, and whether that's basically climate change, which is going to change us so much for so many people, because there's going to be it's going to cause social and political problems too, with movements of populations from areas that are too hot to live in, and so forth. So environmental basically impact and basically everything that's to do with corporate social responsibility here has to be taken on board. Now, corporate social responsibility is to do with the environmental, obviously, but it's also to do with the social, which we mentioned earlier as part of the pastel, and it's also to do with the economic, because those are the three parts of corporate social responsibility. Because you have fiduciary responsibility, which is financial. Then you have your environmental responsibility, which is really to ensure that people working in a safe environment. And when we're talking about the wider environment, then we can start to think about everything that's short circuits for food to come to the table, to avoid transport. How are you going to reduce your carbon footprint? How's all this going to happen? What's going to happen to the airline and transport industries in the future, and so forth? So these are all questions that a lot of organizations are going to have to ask themselves. Then legal, if we go back to our legal, the last letter of pastel, if we go back to our first example of building a house, it would be great. We've already built the house and then discovered there was no planning permission for the house and we have to destroy the house. So that's a very good example of something legal that could happen to you. But if we take it further, there's so many laws out there which affect business. For example, if you're a restaurant or something and you don't have an alcohol license and you still sell alcohol, you're in deep trouble, because you're going to get shut down eventually. Another example is everything that's around hygiene regulations. For example, if they're not respected and you end up poisoning someone in a restaurant, well, then you're going to have some serious consequences to that also, obviously. And obviously you're not going to use other people's copyright, you're not going to plagiarize other people's work, and so forth and so on. So I think we've done the tour now of the SWOT analysis. Now, what I've tried to do here is to give you an outline of how to approach a SWOT analysis. So remember, once again, to finish, so the S and the W, the strengths and weaknesses, we have to look at our internal resources, so our material resources, our human resources, our financial resources, see where we're strong, where we're weaker, yeah? We have to look at our key success factors. Is it adaptability? Is it innovation? Is it differentiation? Is it pricing? Whatever it is, we have to look at all those areas, yeah? And then, if we're looking at opportunities and threats, quite simply, just use the pastel analysis to look at that, yeah? Okay, and we don't even talk about looking at your direct competition, which is obviously very important, and is obviously something also that you can't control from the external sources. So I hope you've enjoyed that today, and I'll see you again in the very near future for some more on management and management techniques and strategy. Thank you very much.